Svitlana. Hey
Hello,
there.
Arne.
Um, Last time we were really crunching on the King's Indian, which was super interesting for me. I really like to get some knowledge about some openings, but here we already played an opening. What is on the list today?
Today we will look at positional sacrifices, which
Nice.
should be also an interesting topic.
Yeah.
So, do you know the difference between what we refer to as a regular sacrifice and a positional sacrifice?
Well, I just assume that the sacrifice for a position is that we will lose a certain amount of piece value for getting a great attack, checkmate, or win more pieces back in the future.
Yeah, so the two sacrifices is the same idea. We are going to give up a piece, a pawn, an exchange, whatever it may be. But the difference between these two types of sacrifices is that the reason why we give them up is different. So a normal sacrifice, it would usually be for an attack, for something that we might gain it back faster immediately. We see how to gain it back, or we see exactly what we get in return. When it comes to positional sacrifices, they are a bit harder to do in your own games and to understand in examples, because they are done more for, well, positional reasons, and that is a bit, it gets ambiguous there, because these positional reasons, it's really hard to evaluate when is it enough, when is it not enough. So what I mean by that is improvement of your pieces,
Okay.
or more space, well, things ruining the opponent's pawn structure. So you might never see this pawn back ever again, but you sacrifice it just to, let's say, open up your bishop. And that is the only reason. It's not because you have an attack immediately. It's not because you're checkmating the next turn, but it's because you do it for the future of your bishop, and maybe,
Yeah.
For example.
I like to
So
do that, to be honest. I like it to do it as much as I like to sacrifice pieces. And it was very similar. There is an example in the King's Indian game with Cheparinov, which we had in the last episode. And I quickly have to announce, if you are watching us for the first time and you go like, who's that? Why are those guys looking so awesome? We have Svitlana Smart Moves. Svitlana is teaching us loads of things about chess, and you can see all the infos below in the description. And you can also replay this exact game here in the link below on the ChessBase news site. You can download this game, and this is training for you, so just take it. It just takes roughly 40 minutes to 50 minutes, and you get a free lesson. It is how it is. So take that. Okay, that was that.
yeah, so the lesson today in positional sacrifices will be, I'll show you a few positions, and you're going to tell me what sacrifice you see here, and would you go for it or not. So not every time I show, it is actually going to be the right sacrifice to go for.
Oh.
So you will have to take a guess with some of these and practice your evaluating skills.
Well,
and would you do it in a real game? So here's our first position. It is a Kramnik game, so he was white. What would you play here? And is there a sacrifice that you see for white?
a lot. Now, technically, one of the nicest. So I'm looking at f6, the longest so far, because it is a square which you can do some damage with the rook. If we would push forward f6, the bishop takes, the rook takes, the pawn takes back. But now I just have to try to... yeah, maybe it is queen to f3. That can be tempting. We want to get the knight away from c3. There we go. Thank you. It's knight to a4, I believe.
Okay. Okay, yeah, this works. So in the initial position, you would like to go for that sacrifice.
That's the first impulse I had. I would have to think about it a bit longer. There was some other thing, which is just knight d5, takes, and then play e4, and then you have a very solid pawn structure, which is also interesting and tempting.
True. Yeah, so these are the two sacrifices that we can think about. Knight to d5, I would not be so tempted by,
Maybe not.
just because we can always, I understand you want to open up the bishop and everything and do have a good center structure, but I would not give a whole piece for it. So this one would not be considered as much as the first one you mentioned, which was the more interesting one, f6. So this is what Kramnik played in his game. So you would do the exact same thing as Kramnik would do, which is a good compliment.
We're like brothers after all, almost. Yeah. So,
but when looking at this position, I also looked at other lines, and after looking at it more, I think I would not have gone for that sacrifice, honestly, because it gets really, really complicated after. And whenever I have a position like that, I would rather just build on the attack instead of like cashing it in right away. Okay. So I think another good variation. So picking to go for the sacrifice is still nice, because that's what Kramnik played, and I can't say anything about that. But I also like this line, which just prepares f6. So bringing the knight here to h5. Knight f4, I think, was a good move. We're not really worried about this because now we have the d5 square fully to our control, and that's just amazing for our knights. Yeah. So I guess this is also sort of a sacrificial line, but not as much. So this is probably what I would pick to play, because we're preparing f6 and we're not sacrificing anything yet. But that might also be because you are the type of person that likes to sacrifice, and that's not exactly as much in my blood to do it every single game. So
hey.
No, but it's a good quality. You have plenty of interesting games because of it.
You always get the curve somehow. I don't know how you make that. You always add something nice on top of that too. I appreciate that.
But f6 was the most interesting variation here, and that's what happened in the game, which is what we will look at. So you mentioned this, taking with the rook and taking here. So how do you think you would evaluate this? So remember, you have a bishop for a rook and a pawn. Yeah, you only have a bishop for a rook and a pawn. So how would you evaluate this? Do you think there's enough compensation? And what did we achieve with this positional sacrifice?
Oof.
Well, is the compensation? Let's start with the first question.
Okay, so as I mentioned, after knight, well, would have to calculate, but after knight a4, and then maybe taking on f6 or putting the queen to f3, it looks quite interesting. Yes, we have some compensation. Also, yeah, g5 is also very tempting. Oh, there's a lot of options. Oh, and then your move, of course. Knight f4, knight h5. So, yes, we have options. I believe a computer or an engine would probably go like black is better, though.
The engine would go that it's equal.
Wow.
So
crazy.
This is already a big sign, because we know that computer values the material a lot. So whenever the computer says something like that in a position,
it means something.
It means that the compensation is pretty good.
Yeah.
But it's still, for me personally, would be really hard to play this in a game, because I see bishop against the rook and a pawn. You're down like 3 points, right? It's quite a lot for some unclear reason, which is why these positional sacrifices are so hard. But yeah, the point is to determine these reasons and to be able to evaluate them, which ones are worth it and which ones aren't. And in this case, it's definitely worth it, because the king is weak and there is so many prospects on how to attack him later. That's the most important, is that there is ideas and you don't run out of them. So you've been mentioning this knight a4 move, which is not what was played. But which is not what was played, but I still understand why you did it. So I think black will have to defend this b6 pawn, probably not with b5, but
no, b5
but you're right.
runs into takes on c5
Yeah,
and
see,
yeah.
I'm worried about a tactic here with knight c4. I don't really know what I can calculate here because of
Oh
this, and then
my
it's
god, there is
complicated.
so much. Yeah, that's true.
But I'm a bit scared of knight c4, not gonna
Okay,
lie.
gotcha. Yeah.
So so yeah, there is long-term pressure on the king, and you've mentioned all the plans that come next,
Oh well, that's
right?
nice.
Yeah,
So,
you've mentioned
yeah.
that the knight can come to h5, that we're going to put the rook on the open file and start attacking the pawn, which is basically what we do.
Mhm.
So we've attacked it a few times, black defended it a few times. What comes next?
Well,
This is your chance to play better than Kramnik.
okay, so I'm thinking of knight e4. Simple as
Uh-huh.
that. To get the bishop involved too. Queen f3 is an option too. What else can we do? So maybe it's all about a little bit of a maneuvering, because there are also some hidden nice moves maybe. Just have to find them.
No,
Well,
it's not that it's not
it's
that
not that
difficult. There is
difficult?
no
No, okay.
many maneuvers. So you mentioned queen f3,
Yeah.
which is along the lines of queen f2, queen f3. It's the same. I was analyzing queen f2.
Mhm.
So the same idea, but just putting the queen on this file. And I like this because it also has the queen h4 idea.
That's a good point, yeah.
So this was actually better than what Kramnik played. He played queen g2, which had a slightly different, like now he was looking at g5 type of
Okay.
things. So it has a different idea, but queen h2 with the idea of queen h4, queen f2 with queen h4 is a nice idea. And I think that after this, it is now white who takes over the initiative. So there are some variations. Oh yeah, I wanted to show this b5 variation because of course black is going to try to create their own counterplay, and let's say play something like b5, and just to start things on the queen side. Then our queen h4 idea happens, and here I was looking at this variation, then I turn on the engine, and the move I see, I wasn't sure if it was a move for white or for black, because I couldn't believe it that the first line is knight b5, and I was confused that I thought maybe maybe it's a move for black, and I'm who it is to move.
Oh my gosh, that
But
is so crazy.
but that was just a move that surprised me. And of course, the idea is the one that we've been wanting to do for a while. It's just to open up that bishop and to just capture it here. So yet another sacrifice. And I mean, this looks very good. And out of necessity, black is just going
the queen
to
has
have
to
to
be given
sacrifice,
back, right? Yeah.
which comes to a material imbalance.
Nice.
Completely new stage of the game now. It's a lot of conversion and
Fritz Trainer by Svitlana Demchenko. You can see it in the ChessBase news site. Get it.
Now that I did it on material imbalances, I can say that every single time that a material imbalance comes up.
That was such a clever move. Smart move, I would always say.
So yeah, that was what I think I would like better. Queen f2 with just the idea of attacking, and if black defends passively, then we do your knight e4 move even better, and all of the squares are ours. Attack continues, and yeah, we're going to take on d6 on f6 eventually, and attack even more. So
yes,
this I think would be really already taking over the initiative. He played queen g2, which was interesting, and it has its own ideas, but it's he kind of switches from the main target, which was the pawn on f6.
Yeah.
So then the game continued. I can show a bit more of it, but the main reason was to evaluate the
h6 for the king to move, I guess.
For the king to move out,
and
after
to stop
which,
g5, of course. Now I get it.
Of course, but we're still going to. He's still trying to do it. The king runs, and then the queen gets repositioned.
My God.
So finally, the queen came to the f file where it's supposed to go. And I want to show you this moment, which will be the last one for this example. Now we have another sacrifice, which is not as positional, but it's still going to be in this category.
It has to be knight d5.
It has to be knight d5. That's right. So these knight d5 moves are always, if you played the Sicilian, this would be like a second nature to you. If you played open Sicilian, it's such a common move. It always happens to ruin the pawn structure. Here it is done to activate this bishop.
And win the game.
And win the game, basically. So now it's just, black has to start giving out pieces for free just to move the king out.
There's a mate threat if the bishop will be taken back with the knight. So, Oh,
all of these make sense. Attack continues. And here, it was a really nice move by Kramnik. I don't know if he was trying to be fancy, but he played a move that I wouldn't expect. And I'm keeping the suspense for so long, but it is queen a1.
Oh my god!
The whole reason
crazy.
The whole reason is just to move the queen on this diagonal, because black is going to lose the queen.
Yeah.
Right. So the queen can I guess queen a1 is the best, right? Because there's there's nothing else. So you're going to lose the queen. It has no squares here. And if it takes the bishop, then the queen gets lost like that.
Yeah.
So that was a nice end to the game. But the main point was this, to decide whether you would or would not go for this positional sacrifice. And like I said, I probably would not have, because I see other ways to continue the attack, right? And I wouldn't risk it that much if I didn't see like a specific variation that I really liked.
Yeah.
But your solution was the same as happened in this game, and it was probably the correct one from a practical standpoint. So you get the point for this one, for going for it.
Thank you very much for this point, Svitlana. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know it means a lot to you.
I think I have 2 points in total now.
From what?
I don't know, 40 lessons? How much did we have?
Yes, you have quite a few points. You get things right from time to time.
Every now and then, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, but now the next one will also be the same. We have here an option to go for a positional sacrifice. I'm not going to say which piece yet, but you'll see it soon enough. So do you see an option for a positional sacrifice? And if so, would you go for it?
Yeah. It's not wild, though.
It's not that wild.
It's just a pawn sacrifice after all.
Yeah.
So
there is.
What's
your idea of the pawn sacrifice?
Knight takes g3, takes back. You don't look so happy. F4.
I'm not.
F4 takes f4, takes f4. Bishop takes f4. And then we have an open file and can do more damage. That was just an idea.
I'm scared of this.
Oh, don't be scared. We have a knight.
I'm very scared of that, actually.
We have this knight. It's going to be fine, Svitlana. Trust me.
I don't think so.
I don't trust
I'm
you.
very worried for our
king's safety.
For safety. Yeah. So it would not. Okay. That would not be the pawn sacrifice, but it is a pawn sacrifice, just not the one that you said. And this is really similar to the King's Indian, so you should be able to use your knowledge from the past. King's Indian. Okay, we didn't talk about this exact pawn sacrifice in the King's Indian.
No. But. Well, okay. So how about going to f4 with the knight instead? Which is kind of the same.
Now you're applying the ideas I've told, not in the right moments, but no. It's not knight f4, because here the diagonal is not as big of an impact.
That is
pawn sacrifice.
So is it just no? That cannot be it. How to sacrifice a pawn? Oh, really peculiar situation.
Well, which pawn moves do you see that could be good sacrifices?
Well, no, it's not a sacrifice. So there's only e4, which is a pawn sacrifice, I guess. Yeah.
Right. But the main thing is after. So would you go for e4?
Probably. Oh, okay, now I get it. So, okay, you take and now you push forward again, right? Yeah.
Yep. So would this be a good pawn sacrifice positionally?
Probably yes. Very, very nice actually. Because if you take back, then the knight goes to g4, discovered. After taking back, the knight goes to g4, discovered, and that should be very strong.
So this situation, you can even just compare the two pawn moves, like e4 and let's say something like f4. Although f4 here, we can think about it tactically, but thinking about it positionally, right? It opens up this whole bishop diagonal. The knight gets an available square in e4. And in these structures, in the King's Indian, whenever, I mean, you can get these pawns a lot. So this is kind of a pawn structure that can happen anytime they took and we took back. So that's very common for the King's Indian. And in these situations, it's always so nice whenever you can play e4. So this is a very common pawn sacrifice in these situations.
Okay.
Firstly, because of the bishop, right? It's going to be a really nice piece later, not right away, which is why it's a positional sacrifice, because it's more for the future and not right away. It's just that we will have a lot of tactical ideas later. Plus, the main thing that this sacrifice is done for is the closure of the bishop, and the knights now don't have the e4 square. So it's not even that great for white to capture immediately because of this. And we have the chance to do this first before recapturing the knight. So actually, they take the knight first and then do this.
That makes a bit more sense, yes.
So
now we still push forward the pawn.
We still push f4. So you see this bishop and this knight now don't have access to our king side, and they will never have an attack.
Nice.
Which is why I like this sacrifice. And especially if I was playing blitz or something, like I would do this without even thinking. But
wow.
Even in a classical game, it's a very common type of pawn sacrifice for the purpose of closing down the opponent's pieces and, well, opening up our own. So
yeah,
that was the one that we should go for.
Cool. That's fairly interesting. Yeah, this is a very straightforward signal to. But can they give the pawn back? Is my question.
Sure, of course they can. So right away they had to move the bishop, and so you're talking about e5.
Yeah, because we can close it down with e5 too. Bishop e5, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So that's always to be considered. Bishop e5 happened in a few moves from here. So first he wanted to prevent castling, so that's why bishop g4 was played, right? Because we want to prevent long castle. And if the king is still on e1, then e5 gets super dangerous because it also opens up the center and not allowing the king to castle. So anyway, he went, a few more moves happened. This is a Kasparov game. Why did I not mention that?
Oh my goodness. Svitlana, your favorite.
My favorite. I don't know how. I always end up with examples from his games. I swear it's not like he's my favorite.
She's a fangirl.
But
she's a huge fangirl. We all know it better.
I randomly end up with his games and I don't even know how it happens.
Unbelievable. I'm just checking games and it's like, oh, this is such a fantastic game. I'll just take it. Oh, it's Kasparov.
Happens to be him. Yeah. So the bishop did come to e5 as you wanted. And I mean, to me, this is probably the perfect example of a pawn sacrifice because you will never get it back, right? You didn't make the e4 pawn a weakness, so you're not planning to gain it back, and you purely did it for the positional reason of having your bishop and closing down the opponent's bishop. And that's how the game continued. I don't think it's necessary to view the entire game because it went on for a very long time. But yeah, ends about here. And do you think there's enough compensation?
Maybe. I wouldn't be sure. I couldn't like say like yeah, of course or something. It's I don't see. Well, we have the bishop pair. We have this pawn on g3. Maybe
You know
this
how
is
I
quite
think about
strong.
pawn sacrifices whenever I want to know if the extra pawn matters or not?
Tell me.
It's usually whenever I think about it in long-term passed pawns. So if I don't see that the opponent can use this pawn as a like passed pawn later, if I see that things are going towards an endgame, then it's not such a big deal, right? So this pawn on e4, it will not really promote. If we trade down a few pieces, we will not really lose this endgame if, I don't know, we have a rook endgame or something like that. So since this pawn is not really threatening us in the long term as much, then it's not a big concern that they have an extra pawn.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, it's a very common idea in the King's Indian, which is good to remember. Sometimes it's more tactical reasons, but this time it was for that positional reason. So let's do
one more.
Let's do one more. Okay. This one is very short.
It's
but
Kasparov.
Sure.
No, it's not.
It's not. But do you see a positional sacrifice here? And what would it be?
Queen takes c4 with an overwhelming
overwhelming material disadvantage
no,
for us.
clearly it is rook taking on e3, because then we can go with the queen to c5, and then we can follow up with all our pieces, and yeah, it looks quite nice like this.
Yeah.
So this would be a move I would just play with. Like the one you did before, I would play this one without even thinking, probably.
Right. I also would. I would think, but I would end up playing it. So the thing...
I would think.
The thing here, this is a game by Petrosian, and he did it. He was known for his exchange sacrifices, for actually positional exchange sacrifices in particular.
I just thought he was like the defense monster, no?
He was the father of those type of sacrifices. He did it all the time. You know, all of these rook c3 type of sacrifice, rook per knight. He did those all the time, and it was often for positional reasons. And this one is also very common to remember, especially if anyone plays, I think the Benoni. If anyone plays the Benoni, this is a common one. And this might have arisen from a Benoni. I don't know if it actually did, but it looks a lot like the structure. So this is very common in the Benoni. Sometimes it's even part of theory. Like you can even see that it's a theoretical line that is just a positional sacrifice. You never get this exchange back.
Yeah.
But the point is that you're going to attack this pawn eventually. You're going to get the pawn for it, and it's going to be knight and pawn against the rook, but opposite colored bishops, so there's some imbalance, and you have things to play for. So you are saying that you would go for this positional sacrifice?
Surely.
Yeah.
I didn't expect the knight to go to c5 though, but yes, it's interesting, and I understand the idea behind it now a bit more.
Right. And often this rook sacrifice is always accompanied by the next move, which is bishop h6. This is how you attack this pawn. You, of course, want your dark-squared bishop to be involved. And the point is, this example could go on for a long time because it's a long positional game. If white didn't just make a blunder in the next move, I honestly don't know what happened here. But they played rook b6. And the game ended. And this is Polugaevsky and Petrosian. So this is the USSR championship, I think.
Maybe
so
it was a bullet game.
I don't think so. That's the thing. I don't think bullet games were a thing in 1983. So it also happens. It also happens to humans. Sometimes you just don't see anything better and you miss like some very simple tactic like that. So the game just ended there, but this is why I said this.
Slip. Okay, yeah, but
yeah, but this is why I said this example was short. But still, this is kind of the main point was to decide on rook e3, which we both decided to go for, and it's a common idea to remember in these pawn structures. And it's one of those positional exchange sacrifices, which is long-term, and you keep up the initiative later, never getting back the exchange, but you keep up the initiative with other factors like your strong bishop.
For you at home, I want to ask you a question. You can write it into the comments. I'm always happy about your commenting, by the way. I'm reading everything. Would you, in this position, would you have immediately taken on e3? Yes or no? I'm just curious. Like, I really want to know. Anyway, we still have a little bit of time. Let's make another one.
Course. Yeah, there's another course of action too. You can just double on the e file, play it.
Exactly.
Play it normally, and it's I think it's a matter of what you like.
Yeah, so, but I'm really curious. I want to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's how we get better at these positional sacrifices. Okay, I guess the last one. This is known. Okay, yeah. Anyway, actually, you get it. You guess it first, and then.
My God, you are taking the examples of some of the strongest players who ever played chess in the world. Now we have Tal against Larsen. Very nice.
Yeah. So, Black has just attacked our knight with
Not
b4.
Nice, really.
And this is a Sicilian, I believe, and it's a very aggressive one with both opposite side castling. Where would your knight go?
Would just stay there, I guess. I see so many. What a beautiful game, first of all, because I love the position for white here. Okay. When you just turned the board around first and I was black, I was like, oh no, how do we get out of this mess? And now I'm just like, I'm so happy. So let me give you all my candidate moves, if I may. So first of all, of course, let's talk about the knight, but I really wouldn't care that much. But what about knight to d5, takes on d5? Then I actually now I have the feeling I know this game.
You might.
And it is a famous example of how to tighten up all the pieces for black somehow. And I think, knight d5 is actually part of this because it attacks the bishop, so you have to act on it. And after d5, black doesn't have that much. Well, furthermore,
yeah, would you go for knight d5?
I don't know. Well, I'm thinking of bishop taking g7 very brutally. Maybe even more brutal, e5, bishop takes h7, queen h5 check, rook d3, king d2 after the queen.
I'm already scared. I would not want to be your opponent in such positions. I don't think I'm ever playing the Sicilian against you because this is scary.
So
I'm not sure if it's good, but it's certainly scary.
I would have to calculate a lot. So
right.
But knight d5 looks quite. This is would be this positional thing. Maybe.
So that's the main question here about knight d5 because this is the positional sacrifice that we're talking about. Although sure it has tactical grounds, but it's positional in a way that we're never getting the knight back, and it was for a positional purpose of opening up our bishop and starting to shift the play onto the king side. So what I was surprised about is because this was one of the examples that is very, very known. Even you think you know this game, right? Of course it's a Tal game, so not surprising that it's known, and it was a candidates semifinals or something, and it was a very famous example for a very long time of like a good attack. And then I looked at this with an engine, and the engine is like, this is wrong.
This is rubbish. What the heck?
This is a wrong sacrifice, and you should just move your knight like a normal person and then continue your attack with your pawns. There is no need for the knight to go anywhere, and it will quietly join the attack from g3, maybe h5, maybe if you really want to.
Those engines have no sense of humor at all.
Yeah, not at all. So I would not blame anyone who would also play knight d5, and it certainly is a move that has a lot of sense to it, and Tal did play it in his game. But I don't want to give Tal a bad reputation, because although people say most of his sacrifices were bad and all of that, well, they didn't live back in that time. They didn't have engines.
Exactly.
And most of them, I think someone did an analysis that he wasn't actually wrong as often as people say. He like all of his sacrifices didn't work. That wasn't true.
Oh, cool. That must be dedicated work. He played a couple of games, I guess, and he sacrificed it a couple of games too.
Of course, in many. But yeah, so according to the engine, it wasn't a good sacrifice, but you were also hesitant about going for it.
Yeah,
So,
but I mean, you knew my other options. What I was tempting for, the engine would go
yeah.
like collapse, probably fall over, go like,
Right.
God, what is wrong with this person?
So the reason why this is not as good is kind of hard for a human to play, which would be g6, right? It's just, it looks so bad to open up this
Terrible.
bishop diagonal, but this would be the right choice because
It's too
the
slow.
attack is a bit slow and you need to make a lot of moves before you make a threat. So right now the bishop is being threatened, and if you move it, then my bishop comes here. And this is what, this is why the sacrifice wasn't as
Yeah.
efficient, and it wouldn't have worked if this happened in the game. But in the game, f5 happened, and there was a nice continuation. Of course, f5 was a mistake. Rook f7 was a mistake, and we had, of course,
Ooh.
even more things that happened here. 95, all of this fancy stuff, and sacrifices from black back to get back to close the bishops, get rid of them. And anyway, I mean, at this point already, white has 2 extra pawns, so the attack kind of worked out, and Tal did end up winning this game. Fancy rook trade. Yeah, there's fancy piece trades. First, white gave away a piece, black gave away a piece. Then the fancy rook trade happened, and yeah, he ended up winning this with being up 2 pawns. But the main example was from the beginning whether you would risk going for that positional sacrifice or not. But yeah, you did a few examples today where you had to decide on the positional sacrifices. I think most of the time your intuition was correct and
Nice.
what you would go for and what you wouldn't. So I'm looking to see more positional sacrifices from you in your games.
Thank you. I think I deserved another point for that. And that was, of course, so entertaining and so much fun, to look at that. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And we see each other soon enough.